Good morning. I want to talk today about the astrology of 2024 and what my expectations for that year are. There are going to be a lot of big changes coming next year, I believe. So let me share my screen so that we can get started. And I just need to get rid of a few windows here so that I can see what I'm doing. So just give me another second. And let's see. Okay. Here we are, 2024 in astrology. And we'll start with the planet Pluto. Now, one of the much anticipated events of 2024 is the return of Pluto to the sign of Aquarius on January 20th, 2024. Pluto will remain in Aquarius for about 9 months until September 1st, 2024, when it briefly retrogrades back into Capricorn until November 19th of 2024, when it returns to Aquarius, where it will remain for approximately the next 20 years. The shift of Pluto from Capricorn to Aquarius signals a transfer of power from individuals to the people, and this is a movement that will become more noticeable over the next 2 decades. We can also expect many technological revolutions during this time, as well as a greater focus on humanitarian issues beginning this year. During the approximately 2.5 months that mark Pluto's retrograde back into Capricorn, though, from September 1st through November 19th, we will likely witness the last gasp of dictators and authoritarian leaders. After 2024, they will feel pressure to bend more and more to the will of the people. Also, on January 20th of 2024, the Sun and Pluto will enter Aquarius on the same day. They will be conjunct on that day at not at Aquarius, but at 29 degrees, 59 minutes of Capricorn, almost in Aquarius. Now, a lot of things in recent years, astrologically, have been taking place at 0+ degrees of Aquarius. And here I have some dates in chronological order. First, on March 31st of 2020, we had Mars conjunct Saturn at 0+ degrees of Aquarius. And that's when we began to see this group effort to very, very quickly come up with a vaccine to combat COVID. This is when COVID started to grow exponentially in March of that year. And this new vaccine that was developed also involved new technology, as would be expected from the sign of Aquarius. Now, later in 2020, on December 21st, Jupiter was conjunct Saturn at 0+ degrees Aquarius. And this signaled a switch for the next couple of hundred years from having conjunctions in earth signs to having conjunctions in air signs. And every 20 years, approximately, we have this conjunction. It signals a change in social movements, but this one's going to be a big change because we're moving from being focused on the physical world to something a little bit more abstract and involving humanitarianism and technology. On March 6, 2022, Venus was conjunct Mars, and this coincided with the group response of NATO to Putin's invasion of Ukraine. From March 23rd, 2023 through June 10th of 2023, Pluto was just sitting there at 0+ degrees Aquarius. So it's really reactivating that point where we had the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. And then coming up in 2024, we're going to have a series of conjunctions of inner planets with Pluto. We'll have Mercury conjunct Pluto on February 5th, Mars conjunct Pluto on February 13th, Venus conjunct Pluto on February 17th, and Venus conjunct Pluto again on December 7th of 2024. And all of these conjunctions take place at 0+ degrees of Aquarius. So the point of that Jupiter Saturn conjunction is just being activated over and over again. So we're on the verge of big social changes and big leaps forward in uh, technology, shifting of power from individuals to the people, and hopefully a more humane, more humanitarian future for the world. Okay, now let's look at a thing or two that's going to be going on with Jupiter. On April 20th, 2024, Jupiter and Uranus will form a conjunction at 21 degrees 50 minutes of Taurus. Now, on the one hand, this signifies an expansion of creativity and inventiveness, but on the other hand, the influence will pass within a week or two. However, because these planets will be in Taurus, it is likely that economic issues may come to the forefront, and a rally in the stock market would be welcomed by many, particularly me. Later, on May 25th, 2024, Jupiter will enter Gemini, where it will spend a year, and this should bring a boost to intellectual ingenuity. Furthermore, on June 2nd, 2024, Jupiter and Gemini will make a trine to Pluto in Aquarius, and thus one might keep an eye out for whatever intellectual or scientific breakthroughs are announced at that time. By the end of the summer, though, on August 19th, again on December 24th, Jupiter and Gemini will square Saturn and Pisces. At these moments, we may see some barriers to growth. However, from late September through mid-November, transiting Jupiter will make a sextile to transiting Chiron, and this will bring out the sweeter, more transcendent side of Chiron. So it's nice we'll have sort of this extended period in fall of 2024 with Jupiter making a sextile to Chiron that may ameliorate or lessen some of the harsher aspects that might be going on at that time. And I also want to point out this year we have both Pluto and Jupiter moving from earth signs into air signs. In earth signs, you're really engaged in and maybe bogged down by the heaviness of physical reality. When you move into air signs, things tend to go to a more abstract, more intellectual kind of level. Uh, so the shift of those two planets from Earth into air, that is going to be one of the big changes that will occur in the year 2024. Okay, now let me talk about Chiron and the spring eclipse season. Now, aside from Pluto's ingress into Aquarius, the planet Chiron may turn out to be the most influential planet for the year 2024. Chiron is most often associated with wounding, but its real purpose is to serve as a bridge between inner and outer planets. And as such, it urges us to transcend and to go beyond the visible world. However, before we can experience the transcendent joy that is Chiron's true nature, we often have to first have our hard Saturnian shells cracked, and that's where the wounding comes about, that then needs to be followed by healing. Hence, when Chiron is active, the result can be either wounding, healing, or transcendent joy. But when the masses are involved, wounding has historically been the most likely outcome. In the first half of 2024, there will be a series of conjunctions with Chiron, one of which will be extremely important. The first, though, is a conjunction of the North Node with Chiron on February 19th, 2024. And this conjunction will momentarily intensify the influence of Chiron. Next is a conjunction of Mercury with Chiron on March 20th, 24, just a few days before a lunar eclipse. Following this is what may be the most important astrological configuration of 2024. A solar eclipse on April 8th, during which the Sun, Moon, and Chiron will all be exactly conjunct at 19 degrees, 24 minutes of Aries. We'll talk about both eclipses shortly and how the April 8, 2024 solar eclipse might impact the world. Following this solar eclipse, though, in April and May, we'll have Mercury conjunct Chiron again, Venus conjunct Chiron, Mercury conjunct Chiron a third time, and Mars conjunct Chiron. The three conjunctions of Mercury with Chiron in the spring of 2024 suggest a possible wounding of things related to Mercury, such as communication or commerce. But for some, it could be a moment of clarity and enlightenment, the good side of Chiron. Okay, here is a table for you showing some of these Chiron conjunctions that are going to be occurring in the spring of, let's see, 2024. And we have three times that Mercury is going to be conjunct Chiron. And the last, we have Mars conjunct Chiron on May 29th, 2024. Now, you can see from this graph down here that for most of February, the North Node will be conjunct Chiron within a 1-degree orb. So that is going to kind of intensify Chiron for the entire month. Okay, there's a lunar eclipse on March 25th of 2024. And here we can see Chiron conjunct the lunar nodal axis. So it's going to be intensified somewhat by this eclipse. We also have Saturn conjunct Venus, which could put a damper on things, restrict our joy, our happiness a bit. We have Jupiter within 5 degrees of a conjunction with Uranus. This is in Taurus, which rules financial matters. This could cause some unexpected developments, hopefully a sudden expansion of the economy or the stock market. Now, the planets are all fairly close together. There is a beneficial sextile from Pluto to the Sun that can lessen some tensions, and also a nice sextile between Saturn, Venus up here, and Jupiter, Uranus here. Aside from that, things are fairly close together. And when we have things so close together, well, the energy can't flow as freely. It puts too much energy and just a few signs, a few places in the chart, and that creates an imbalance. The moon is all by itself on one side of the chart, and excuse me, it's in Libra, and this suggests there's going to be a lot of effort focused on trying to bring about some peace, some peaceful and balanced relations between people. Sorry, I'm getting over a respiratory infection or virus still, so I may cough a little bit. But anyway, when we move on to the solar eclipse on April 8th of 2024, Sun and Moon are now in a conjunction with Chiron, which is exact to the minute. And that makes the influence of Chiron much, much more powerful at this eclipse. Also, the planets are crunched a little bit more closely together. So we have a little bit, quite a bit of an imbalance here. The influence of Chiron, it can bring a lot of wounding to the world as a result of the solar eclipse, which is why I suspect that 2024 may be a year of wounding. We still have some beneficial sextiles. Pluto making a sextile to Neptune and Venus here. Jupiter and Uranus are closer to one another, and they're making a sextile to Mars and Saturn. And this conjunction between Mars and Saturn, I believe, will be exact within a couple of days. And that could be somewhat worrisome because Saturn can frustrate Mars, and Mars in return can become more aggressive, more violent. That's the downside. The positive side would be if there are some restrictions, some restraints placed upon violence and anger that wind up being beneficial. As Jupiter gets closer to this exact conjunction with Uranus, which will happen soon, there could be swings in the stock market, either going way up or way down. Okay, but this is going to be a very, very important eclipse that could result in a lot of wounding. And I have a list over here of people and groups that are going to be directly affected by this eclipse as a result of having things which are closely conjunct the point of the solar eclipse or in opposition or square to it. So, for instance, Hamas has Jupiter at 19 plus degrees Aries. Iran has Pluto at 19 plus degrees Libra, directly opposite this conjunction here. Netanyahu has his moon at 19 plus degrees Libra. Putin has his Saturn Neptune midpoint at 19 plus degrees Libra. We'll talk more about Putin later. King Charles III has his Mars Pluto midpoint at 18 degrees Libra, 45 minutes. So that's pretty close. He'll likely be affected by this eclipse. The United Kingdom has its moon at 19 degrees Cancer, 26 minutes, in the 10th house. So leaders in the United Kingdom could be affected by this solar eclipse. And the United States is going to be very strongly affected. We'll talk about that pretty shortly. In the July 2nd, 1776 chart that I like to use for America, that is the date for the passage of the Resolution for Independence. Chiron was at 20 degrees 6 minutes of Aries, very close to this conjunction. In fact, Chiron doesn't move all that fast, so this conjunction is going to be activated in all the July 1776 charts, and all of those will have Sun, Moon, and transiting Chiron conjunct natal Chiron. But in the July 2nd, 1776 chart, the Sun Pluto midpoint is at exactly 19 degrees 24 minutes of Aries, just like these planets here. This suggests there could be some sort of wounding to our leaders, people with power in this country. Also, the United States, for all the July 1776 charts, is going to go through 2 Chiron returns in 2024 and 1 in 2025. So Chiron is going to be very important in the astrology related to the United States, to America, in the year 2024. Also directly impacted by this solar eclipse will be me, since I have Neptune in my 6th house at 19 degrees 18 minutes of Libra, a very strong opposition to this conjunction of 3 planets. Now, that could affect my health, but I went through 2 of these exact oppositions of transiting Chiron to Neptune last summer, and my health was not affected so much. I was doing a lot of meditation, and I made some great steps in spiritual growth, breakthroughs, enlightenment periods. Last summer, I feel like spiritually I went up to a whole new level, and that is one of the better things, uh, outcomes you can get when you have something like transing Chiron in opposition to your Neptune or interacting with some other planet. Okay, so uh, a lot of these other people in groups also probably experienced last year some moments when Chiron was activating these planets. So we can also look backward to see possibly what happened with these people then. I'm not going to do that in this presentation, but that's something you can do on your own. Okay, now if we compare the positions of the outer planets from the time of the October 2023 solar eclipse to this one, we'll see that almost all of the outer planets are in the same positions, roughly, that they occupied last October. Chiron was activated during the October 2023 solar eclipse by its conjunction with the lunar nodal axis. And since this eclipse was immediately preceded by the invasion of Israel by Hamas, there are fears that history will repeat itself on April 8th, 2024. Only Saturn will have moved on by about half a sign from October 2023 to April 2024, but hopefully Pluto, which has moved into Aquarius, may lead to a more beneficial outcome. So there is a real concern that the conflict currently going on in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas, that it may intensify at this time, expand, and that there could even be a larger regional war involving Iran, which has been behind the financing and strategy of a lot of these terrorist groups in the Middle East. Uh, a better outcome would be if tensions are resolved and healing begins. It would be so much nicer to see the healing side of Chiron be what comes to the forefront of this time. And maybe that will happen. But we can't ignore the possibility that with so many people and countries in the Middle East being impacted by this April 8th solar eclipse, and with the planetary positions on April 8th, the outer planets being in pretty much the same positions they were in during the October 14th, 2023 solar eclipse, there's a definite possibility that history will repeat itself. Um, that is between now and then, that is what we should work on to try and keep that from happening. But we also have to keep in mind the possibility of a much larger conflict and uh, direct involvement or war with Iran at this time. Hopefully that won't happen, but we have to do the work to keep it from happening. Okay, now on February 2nd, 2024, Chiron enters its retrograde zone at 19 degrees Aries. On July 26, 2024, Chiron will turn retrograde at 23 degrees 32 minutes of Aries. On December 29th of 2024, Chiron will turn stationary direct at 19 degrees 0 minutes of Aries. And on April 21st, 2025, Chiron will leave the retrograde zone. Okay, important consequence of this retrograde cycle is that Chiron will spend about 4 months from November 2024 through February 2025 within 1 degree of its position during the April 8, 2024 solar eclipse. Consequently, this 4 month span of time may reactivate this point, resulting in even more eclipse consequences, particularly around November 29th, 2024 and January 28th, 2024. Those are the dates when Chiron, transing Chiron, will be back at that position that was in on the April 8th 2024 solar eclipse. So on this graphic down here, you can see that 4-month period in which that eclipse point is really going to be reactivated. Now, fortunately, however, transiting Jupiter will make an extended sextile to transing Chiron from late September through mid-November. We saw that slide not too long ago, and this could provide some relief, at least in November, by bringing forth the sweeter side of Chiron as transcendent joy. So, not only could that April 8th, 2024 solar eclipse kick off some more intense wounding for the world, and particularly those individuals and countries affected by that point. But then it may be revisited again during this 4-month period from November 2024 through February 2025. Bad things could happen, but like I say, if we all focus on taking the high road, doing acts of love and kindness every day, giving a little to charity, doing what we can to make this a better world, then that can lay the groundwork for a better outcome. Outcomes that focus on healing and joy rather than wounding and destruction. So, astrology doesn't really predict what's going to happen. It just gives the weather, tells you what the weather is going to be. And standing in between the astrological weather and specific events are always people with free will. So use your free will in a good way, and then we might avoid some of the more dire things that will be possible in 2024. Okay, quick look at Mars. There are 2 conjunctions that Mars will make with outer planets that will see some development throughout the year. First, Mars conjoins with Pluto on February 13th, squares Pluto on June 11th as an opposition to Pluto on November 3rd, right before the American presidential election. The combination of Mars with Pluto can be very explosive, and whatever is initiated on February 11th may come to fruition on November 3rd. The second conjunction to keep an eye on is the Mars-Saturn conjunction of April 10th, 2024, just 2 days after that April 8th solar eclipse, and it will change into a square on August 15th. These aspects can result in violence, Mars, due to increased frustration, Saturn, or they can signal a suppression, Saturn, of violence, Mars. Either outcome is a possibility, but the key thing to note is that what happens at the conjunction is to note what, let me say that again, but the key thing to note is what happens at the conjunction, as this might set the tone for what follows. So we have a conjunction of Pluto and Mars in February. That is going to unfold throughout the year, advancing to a square in June into an opposition in November, right before the presidential election in America. So you want to keep an eye out as to what happens at the time of this conjunction. That may tell you what sorts of tensions or issues we'll be dealing with later on in the year. Now, there's also going to be in between, some sextiles and some trines. I don't have those dates marked down, but if you get an ephemeris, you can look at those dates and keep an eye out to see what sorts of beneficial things happen. Now, Mars also makes a conjunction, this time with Saturn, a couple of days after the April 8th solar eclipse, and that advances to a square by August. So, again, look to see what happens on April 10th and at the solar eclipse on April 8th. Those issues and tensions again may come to the forefront around mid-August. Okay, let's take a look at the fall eclipse season. Now, in general, the fall eclipse season will be much more benign as compared to the spring eclipses. And this can be seen by the presence of kite formation, a grand trine topped by a smaller triangle, in the September lunar eclipse, and a grand trine, a smaller separate triangle, in the October solar eclipse. There may be some tensions associated with the lunar eclipse due to Mercury opposition Saturn and Venus opposition Chiron. But with Neptune conjunct the eclipse, there may also be an outpouring of compassion. However, a strong sesquiquadrate semisquare to Mercury Saturn from Pluto could signal some problems caused by authoritarian leaders. Around the time of the October solar eclipse, there may be some unexpected events, an irritation due to Uranus sesquiquadrate Mercury and Saturn semisquare Pluto. Okay. There is also a square to the Sun, Moon, and Mercury from Mars that can trigger some aggression, but is not overly strong. So let's just take a look at these. This is the September 17th, 2024 lunar eclipse. It's looking much more beneficial than the spring eclipses. We have this grand trine topped by a smaller triangle, which creates this wonderful kite formation. Here is Neptune conjunct the moon, opposition sun. This could intensify feelings of compassion at the time of the eclipse. We do have an opposition between Saturn and Mercury that can cause some tensions or frustrations. We do have an opposition between Chiron and Venus that can result in some emotional wounding, having our feelings, our right brains, our values feeling wounded in some way. Pluto is making a pretty strong sesquiquadrate to Mercury, semi-square to Saturn. That could cause some irritation from authoritarian leaders. And let's see, I mentioned Uranus in the last slide. I think maybe I meant Pluto. Let me go back, see what I had here. Uranus sesquiquadrate Mercury. Sorry, that should have been Pluto sesquiquadrate Mercury. So scratch whatever I said about Uranus on the previous slide. Uranus is actually making a trine to the sun, sextile to the moon and Neptune. And that is also going to help release tension. It's part of the kite formation. And so there may be some good innovations in business. Jupiter is making a trine to Venus and a sextile to Chiron. So that will help lessen the tensions involved with this Venus Chiron opposition. So, all in all, this is a much more positive eclipse than what we had in the spring. We have a solar eclipse on October 2nd. Okay, here's where that Uranus sesquiquadrate Mercury comes in. Sorry, so what I said wasn't quite wrong because I was talking about the October 2nd solar eclipse. But here we still have a grand trine effect. There's still this smaller triangle, it's just not attached to the grand trine now. There's a square from Mars to Sun, Moon, and Mercury, but it's not all that strong. A little bit of aggression, but not too overpowering. Uranus makes that sesquiquadrate to Mercury. That could cause some unexpected developments in relationships since Mercury is in Libra. And Pluto is still making that semi-square to Saturn, which can perhaps frustrate efforts toward peace, plans to construct a lasting peace. So a little bit of tension, but all in all, both the lunar eclipse on the 17th and the solar eclipse on October 2nd, much more positive than the eclipses that we'll see in the spring of 2024. And let's see, since I was talking about October solar eclipse here, my previous statement about Uranus sesquiquadrant Mercury, I said ignore. I said that's going to be Pluto. Well, that Pluto does that at the lunar eclipse. Uranus does it at the solar eclipse. So my statement here is accurate after all. Now let's take a look at how America will be impacted by these eclipses. And to the left here, I've got bi-wheel with the July 2nd, 1776 chart for the passage of the resolution for independence as the inner wheel and the April 8th, 2024 solar eclipse as the outer wheel. As can be seen, the Sun-Moon Chiron conjunction at 19 degrees 24 minutes of Aries is only 42 minutes of arc from the position of Chiron in the July 2nd, 1776 chart right here. This is one reason why I expect the April 8th, 2024 solar eclipse to have a significant impact on America. Also, the Sun-Pluto midpoint is at exactly 19 degrees 24 minutes of Aries. Here you can see Sun in that natal chart, Pluto in that natal chart, their midpoint, exactly where this big eclipse conjunction is occurring. And that could cause some wounding to leaders, particularly political leaders in America. Additionally, uh, the lunar nodal axis you can see here is going to be conjunct Saturn pretty strongly. So there could be some payback we have to make for our past actions and our past transgressions. Okay. Now, furthermore, America will experience 3 Chiron returns in 2024-25. And here you can see the first one is on April 20th. Oops. Not long after that April 8th solar eclipse. Second one on November 9th, just right after our presidential election on November 5th. And then 2025, the third and final one, occurs on February 17th. Now, we've been through all of this before. These Chiron returns are on the heels of 3 oppositions of transing Chiron to natal Saturn that occurred in 2022 and 2023. And the last time America went through these transits was in the early 1970s, specifically from 1972 to 1975. Back then, the country was in turmoil over Watergate and also legal transgressions committed by Spiro Agnew. And ultimately, both Vice President Agnew and President Nixon had to resign. One moment, though, which reflected the higher influence of Chiron was the transcendent work of the Senate Select Committee to investigate Watergate. And also, the Supreme Court gave women control over their own bodies with their decision on Roe v. Wade. Okay. This series of oppositions to Saturn, followed by conjunctions with Chiron that we saw in the first half of the 70s, that is repeating now. This time around, though, it is the actions of twice impeached President Donald Trump that have thrown the country into turmoil. But we have also seen the transcendent work this time by the January 6th committee in response to the January 6, 2021 insurrection. Additionally, the Supreme Court has wounded many Americans by overturning Roe v. Wade and taking away the right for women to have control over their own bodies. If history doesn't exactly repeat itself, it certainly rhymes when astrological aspects repeat themselves. And below are some graphs showing the oppositions and conjunctions of transing Chiron with natal Saturn and Chiron between 2022 and 2025 that are similar to what we saw in the 1970s. Also, throughout the summer of 2023, there was a near conjunction of transing Chiron with natal Chiron, and this is during the time that Donald Trump received some indictments. So Trump has legal problems. They were really in the news in summer of 2023. I believe we saw a couple of indictments during this period. But it is truly amazing the way in which we are repeating or at least rhyming with the events of the first half of the 70s as these Chiron aspects to the USA chart repeat themselves. Okay, now for a quick look at Joe Biden. Well, probably the most serious transit to Joe Biden's chart in 2024 is a square from transiting Pluto to his fifth house natal moon. The moon rules Cancer, and this sign, depending on the house system used, is either on the cusp of his eighth house or wholly contained in his eighth house. Either way, this indicates death as a possible outcome. Also possible are serious illness, mental stress, and or problems with children since his moon's in the fifth house. At Biden's advanced age, death or illness are certainly possibilities. But the good news is that Joe Biden is a mature individual who has learned how to handle great diversity. And time again, I've seen him handle with ease astrological crises that would floor a less evolved individual. Thus, I am very much hoping for Biden's continued life and good health, and that he retains his current vigor, and that if anything, if this has to manifest in some way, that it doesn't go beyond just the problems and the stress he will experience related to his son's legal difficulties. Anyway, there was also a very near square of transing Pluto to his natal moon in April and May of 2023. And at that time, the issue that came forward was his son, Hunter Biden, and whether Joe Biden had been involved in Hunter's questionable activities. And already we have seen that Republicans want to make this an issue in 2024. So, at the very, very least, I'm expecting this to be a big issue throughout the year. In this graph down below, a 1-degree orb is used. If we use the 2-degree orb, then you'd have Pluto within 2 degrees of squaring natal moon for the entire year. So, President Biden is going to have stress, certainly from that. And the Republicans, we know they want to impeach him. But I'm hoping for good health and mental strength and vigor for Joe Biden for many, many years to come. All right. In June, July of 2024, transiting Saturn will be near the bottom of Joe Biden's chart. And astrologically, this position often coincides with retirement from the limelight and focus instead on one's home and family. Following this, in August and September, transiting Uranus will be in opposition to Biden's sun, and this could result in some unexpected developments in his life. What exactly will happen? We don't know. We only know the basic nature of the planets involved. And all of these things are present in the transits to Biden's natal chart that will take place on July 15th of 2024. Here you can see Pluto making a strong square to his natal moon, transing Uranus in opposition to his sun, and also natal Venus, and transiting Saturn very close to the absolute bottom of his chart. Now let's take a quick look at Donald Trump for in 2024. Now, as mentioned above, America has so far gone through a series of oppositions to its natal Saturn, from transing Chiron, one near conjunction of natal Chiron with transing Chiron, and we have a series of exact conjunctions to come this year and next from transing Chiron to natal Chiron. Past year, Past history has shown that political leaders are often affected by these transits, and so far it has been Donald Trump who has borne the brunt of the wounding. His personal transits for 2024 suggest that wounding, frustration, and reversals of luck are likely to continue. Thus, here's what I pretty much anticipate for Trump in 2024. In January, Chiron conjunct Chiron, wounding. In February, South Node conjunct Jupiter. That could result in exaggerated behavior and impaired luck. Mid February to mid March, Chiron opposite his natal Jupiter, impaired luck. May and August, Saturn square his natal Uranus. Uranus is in his 10th house, so this suggests impaired status. Mid-June, mid-May to June, and mid-November to December, Uranus conjunct midheaven. That suggests a change in status. Mid-June to early September, Chiron square his natal Saturn. Wounded status. His natal Saturn is conjunct his Venus, which rules his 10th house of status. July to October, transiting Uranus square his Mars. That's going to be both anger and personal changes. Mars is conjunct his ascendant in his birth chart. And from September to November, South Node conjunct is Neptune. That could result in scandal, add to his glamour, and also add to misinformation and create just a relatively confused sense of things. And just here for reference, I've got Donald Trump's natal chart. And over here, you can see the hard transits that he will go through in 2024. You could pause and look closely at this to get some exact dates. All right, now let's talk about the fall 2024 presidential election. If you ask me who will win the November 5th, 2024 presidential election in America, the correct answer is that I don't know. In fact, given President Biden's age and Donald Trump's legal difficulties, I can't really say with complete confidence that either one will be a candidate when the time to vote comes. Either one could die, have to drop out due to illness associated with their both of them are of advanced age, and Donald Trump could be in prison for all we know. However, what I can say is this: Pluto will have moved back into Capricorn, and while that doesn't necessarily favor the more progressive candidate, it does suggest that voters will be looking for someone that they perceive as strong and traditional. However, at the same time, Pluto is only about 3 months of arc away from returning to Aquarius, and anticipation of what's to come may favor a more progressive candidate. The chart for election day contains several beneficial sextiles and trines, but there are also a few tense aspects that may result in tension or even violence. For example, Mars is making a strong opposition to Pluto, and Neptune is making a strong square to the Moon and Venus. Hence, discord and misinformation will also be present on that day. However, transiting Jupiter will be making a strong sextile to both transiting and natal Chiron in the July 2nd, 1776 chart, and this too could nudge the country in a more progressive direction. Either way, just 5 days after this presentation, 5 days after the election, will be a second return of transiting Chiron to natal Chiron in this July 2nd chart for America. And so, one way or another, the results of this election will likely be very impactful for America. So, these are just the general transits on election day. You see a lot of nice trines, these small triangles, which are very good. Grand trine, this side of it's kind of weak. But We have Mars strongly in opposition to Pluto. That creates tension. We have Neptune making a decent square to Moon and Venus, which could result in more misinformation. But this strong sextile between Jupiter and Chiron, which will be present both transit to transit and transit to natal chart, that is going to bring in some of the kinder, higher spiritual side, more joyous side of Chiron, and that will probably alleviate some tensions. Now, I often point out that when you look at astrological influences, well, in the real world, we mix hot water with cold water, we get lukewarm water. You don't get things canceling each other out that way in astrology. When you have a variety of influences, some beneficial, some rather tense, it just goes together like a tossed salad. They're both there, side by side. And if you have enough favorable aspects, then that can make the uh, harder things that happen more endurable, easier to get through. Okay, if Joe Biden is a candidate, and here are his transits on election day. The good news for him is that transiting Neptune is completing a grand trine with natal Sun, Venus, and Jupiter, and that configuration looks very favorable and can increase his personal magnetism. So this is transiting Neptune, completing this grand trine with his Sun, Venus, and Jupiter. However, he also has transiting Pluto in opposition to transiting Mars, completing a T-square with his natal moon. That's here, here, and here. That doesn't look good at all. That in and of itself can be very life-threatening. Additionally, transiting Uranus is in his sixth house, has to do with health, squaring natal Chiron, and in opposition to his natal uh, Sun, Mercury, and Venus over here. I have Mercury kind of covered up. And this suggests that some unexpected wounding that does not bode well for him. So there's some very good indications. There are some very stressful indications and indications of unexpected events and wounding of some sort. However, if we look at Biden's fall eclipse charts, then we see the same aspects in play, but the eclipses also activate his 10th, fourth house axis, which means his status will be highlighted. That could be for good or bad. I suspect it will be for good. I kind of give Biden a slight edge if he is the candidate at election day. But it's close. Things could go either way. Now, if Donald Trump is a candidate, remember he is also of advanced age and he could be in jail. But if he is the candidate on election day, then these are here his transits. And the good news for him is that transiting Jupiter is conjunct his Sun and North Node in the 10th house, which has to do with status. And Venus is conjunct his natal moon, and that is a very favorable configuration. So you see that here and here. They both have very favorable configurations on election day. This one may be a little bit more favorable, uh, but they also both have some tensions and some negatives. So at the same time, transiting Uranus is conjunct his midheaven and square his natal Mars. That suggests a change in his status for better or worse, and that he will be very angry at this time. Additionally, if we look at transiting Chiron, then it is within a 3-degree orb of a square to his natal Saturn, Chiron squaring Saturn here, and in opposition to his natal Jupiter down here. This could wound both his status and his luck. His status because Saturn is actually conjunct his Venus, which rules his 10th house. of status, and Jupiter rules his luck. So you can see they both got positive aspects and negative aspects, and that's why it's hard to predict the outcome. However, if we look at Trump's transits from the fall eclipses, I'm, I've just got the October 2nd solar eclipse here, like I did for Biden. Uh, it's going to be his second eighth house axis, which is activated. And this puts a focus on finances and survival. Now, with Biden's 10th house being activated, I think it could bring him down, but I think it'll more likely give him a boost. With Trump's second eighth house being activated, I think he's going to maybe have more financial and legal problems at this time. But like I said, it could be that by the time we get to November 5th, that neither one is the candidate for their party. They're both of advanced age and they both have some problems to deal with this year. Okay, lastly, let's take a look at Putin. Now, at Astro Databank, Putin's birth data is classified as XX, which means dirty data. That means there's some question about when and where was he actually born. However, the chart below, or actually to the left that I use, is the one most people use. Its birth data has been verified by Putin's webmaster and it seems to work quite well. And so with that said, I'll proceed with my analysis. Now, one thing I want to point out here is you can see Saturn and Neptune are in a pretty good conjunction in this chart for Putin's birth, less than 4 degrees of separation between them. And the thing you want to realize going forward is that Saturn Neptune conjunctions have traditionally signified big changes in direction and philosophy for Russia. The Bolshevik Revolution occurred in 1917. After such a conjunction, in 1952, following a conjunction, we had the death of Stalin and the de-Stalinization of uh, the Soviet Union, and also the birth of Putin in 1952. In 1989, following a conjunction, we had the fall of the Berlin Wall, and that was particularly notable since Saturn represents structure, Neptune dissolves structures. We literally saw that wall dissolve before our very eyes. And the next exact conjunction of Saturn and Pluto, we have a near conjunction in 2025, an exact conjunction on February 20th in 2026. And everyone is pretty much, all astrologers are pretty much expecting Putin to be gone by then. That conjunction should coincide with another ideological shift in Russia. And even if Putin is somehow able to stay in power, able to hold on to that power, I suspect he will become increasingly irrelevant from that moment on as society changes. Also, since Putin was born under a Saturn Neptune conjunction, I note that when he came into power, he himself caused another change in the ideological direction of Russia. Russia was trying to become a democracy, more like a Western democracy at that point, and Putin reversed course. So once again, we see the impact of Saturn and Neptune on Russia. Now, if we look at Putin's hard aspects for 2024, we see that many involve Chiron, and this suggests wounding throughout the year. Just look at this graph down here. Let's see, we got Chiron opposition Saturn, Chiron square Uranus, Chiron opposition to Neptune here and here, Chiron opposition to Mercury all the way from June through September. So I Would not be surprised if a lot of the rumors of Putin's health problems are true. I would not be surprised if he has more health problems. When Chiron is affecting an individual like this, they can be wounded and they can also wound others. Both those things can happen. Okay, there are also hard aspects from Uranus, which will push for change. Let's see, we have Uranus square his midheaven and square his 10th house Pluto. Both of these are going to be pushing for change. And the last time we saw this kind of aspect was in summer of 2023, and that is when Prigozhin marched on Moscow and challenged Putin's power. And we'll also have a square from transiting Neptune to natal Mars in February that could manifest as illness or even assassination attempt, or a lot of muddled, angry thinking on Putin's part. We don't know exactly what will happen. Like I said, this is just a weather report. What happens depends upon the choices that people make using their free will. And we can only guess at how well prepared Putin is to resist the winds of change. However, we do know that the astrological weather doesn't favor smooth sailing throughout the year. And the specific dates when these things will happen, you can glean that from the bar graphs below right here. Okay, now as I mentioned previously, Putin is one of those leaders who will likely be greatly affected by the April 8th, 2024 solar eclipse. Aspects from Chiron may make wounding more likely. Aspects from Uranus make a change in status more likely. A square from transing Neptune to natal Mars makes illness, assassination, or confused anger of some sort more likely. And there are also some midpoint activations. So this exact conjunction of Sun, Moon, and Chiron at 19 degrees 24 minutes Aries at the time of the April 8th, 2024 solar eclipse. It is pretty closely in opposition to both his Saturn and Neptune, but looking here, you can see his Saturn-Neptune midpoint. It's at 19 degrees of Aries, so there's only going to be about 6 minutes of arc away from exact opposition to the Sun, Moon, and Chiron over here. So he's really going to be impacted by the solar eclipse. He also has Uranus, Jupiter, making a conjunction with natal Jupiter, squaring Pluto, South Lunar Node, and midheaven up here, which means it's also squaring the North Node down here. So this is going to create more pressure for a change in Putin's status. And he's got transiting Neptune, making a pretty strong square to natal Mars. So illness, assassination, confusion, violence, uh, that is part of what lies ahead in Putin's future for 2024. Now, Putin's troubles will likely continue into the fall season of eclipses. At the time of this September 17th lunar eclipse, he will have transiting Chiron opposite 12th house natal Neptune right here, also opposite Mercury, transiting Mars opposite his natal Chiron. So these are two indications of wounding, and the lunar nodal axis is also going to be squaring his natal Chiron. So it's likely that either he will be wounded or he will wound others at this time. And remember also that transiting at Chiron, it hits that uh, point, it lingers around that point of 19 degrees 24 minutes Aries, where the April 8th solar eclipse occurs, for about 4 months, November, December of this fall, 2024, then January, February of 2025. So Putin will also be revisiting the impact of that April 8th, 2024 solar eclipse later in the year and in early 2025. And the fall eclipses suggest a lot of wounding for him or his wounding of others at this time. Okay, let me go back a second here. Yeah, here's where I have Mars in opposition to Chiron. At the time of the October 2nd solar eclipse, the only significant change is that transing Mars will now be squaring Putin's natal Sun and Saturn. So that's not necessarily going to be good for him. And this will likely affect his status in some way. And this may be the year in which Putin ceases to be the leader of Russia. Like I said, it's not a given, but the pressure has been there this year and it's going to increase next year. He may be overthrown, he may be assassinated, he may become too ill to continue. We just have to wait and see. Furthermore, Putin may be ousted even early in the year, since at the time of the April 8th, 2024 solar eclipse, transiting Pluto will be conjunct Russia's descendant. Transiting Saturn and Mars will be opposite Russia's natal Jupiter, and transiting Uranus will be opposite Russia's natal Pluto. However, again, what ultimately happens also depends upon how firm Putin's grip on power is in the coming year, how well protected he is, and how robust his medical care is. So here I have Russia's chart on the inside. It's set for December 25th, 1991, following the breakup of the old Soviet Union. And this chart, we have Pluto will have just recently crossed the descendant. So this promises some sort of revolution, some shakeup in Russia, particularly since Pluto is now in Aquarius. Power goes back to the people. Uh, Mars and Saturn are going to be in opposition to natal Jupiter. That by itself would be rather dire. And Uranus in the 10th, trancing through the 10th house, has to do with status and the leaders. It's going to be in opposition to both Pluto and Venus. Pluto in Russia's chart signifies Putin. Since Putin, he's a Libra, but I believe he has uh, Scorpio rising. If we go back to his chart here, yeah. And Pluto, the ruler of Scorpio, is in his 10th house, conjunct that south node. It's in Leo. He really desires to be an old style Russian czar. He wants to go back to the past. But anyway, Pluto in Russia's chart, it represents Putin specifically at this time. So, Russia, I think a lot of people really want him gone. Okay, so here's the summary. Pluto's ingress into Aquarius will usher in a shift of power to the people, humanitarianism, and technological advances. Jupiter's ingress into Gemini will begin a year of mental ingenuity. The spring eclipse season could result in a year of wounding and increased tensions in the Middle East. But if we make good choices, then wounding could be replaced by healing and transcendent joy. The fall eclipse season will be more beneficial. However, America will likely continue to see significant political turmoil, mass shooting, and climate change events in 2024 due to transing Chiron. President Biden will be under intense pressure from Pluto square his natal moon, and Donald Trump will likely experience more wounding. I didn't mention the presidential election here, but like I've said, it's kind of up for grabs. We don't know if at this point will Biden and Trump, will either one make it to the finish line. Whoops. Sorry. Let me get back to where I was here. second. So, will Biden and Putin both be able to make it to the finish line? Will they actually be the candidates, or will one or both of them have to drop out for health problems, or will Trump be in jail? We just don't know. And even if they do both make it to that November 5th election day, uh, they both have good things in their chart. They both have troublesome things. So it's really hard to say how things will turn out. Like I said, I think Biden has a bit of an edge, but it's all uncertain. Uh, Regardless of who gets elected, that election will be followed by very closely by another Chiron return in the USA chart. Uh, we could experience more wounding, and then we have a third Chiron return early on in 2025. So, regardless of who the winner is, some wounding, some restructuring of our democracy is still ongoing. And then Vladimir Putin will also be under intense pressure and may even lose his position and his power and status in Russia. And even if Putin is not gone by the time of the February 20th, 2026 Saturn Neptune conjunction, then he will probably become increasingly irrelevant from that time on. Astrologically, we're expecting another big ideological shift in Russia uh, between now and 2026. What form it will take, again, people decide that through their exercise of free will. Astrology just gives the weather, people give the events. Okay, uh, that is going to be it. Let me see if I can stop sharing my screen now. Okay, and I'm back. So that is it. That is my overview for 2024. And now we just have to sit back, wait and see what happens, but we don't have to sit back passively. Like I said, if we all engage in kindness, if we all give to charity, if we all consciously take the high road in every situation, then uh, the bad things that might happen in 2024 don't have to happen. We can turn wounding into healing and healing into joy. So that's it for 2024. That's it for today. I hope to see you again, but for now, I'll just say so long and be well.